How's it going, everyone? Today I'm going to do a tier list on the entire meta, and I'm also going to show you the matchup spreads for the bigger decks, the decks that you're going to face more often, so you get a complete look at the meta and you can make a really educated guess. There's like a $10,000 tournament going on, I believe, this weekend, so hopefully this is a nice tool for you to look back on and help with your decision making. If I look tired at all, it's 11 o'clock at night, but I'm going to be honest, I just really felt like making a video. I'm excited to be making content. There's now 15,000 of you guys subscribed to the channel, so I just want to say I really appreciate all of you who have chosen to subscribe. It's really cool that I get to do this and have anyone watch, so thank you guys so much. If you have not subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Real quick before I start, can I just say that this End's Castle Bridge might be the greatest song in Pokemon history. You guys just gotta enjoy this with me. So let me explain the tiers. We have S tier, where our best decks are going to go. We have the true meta tier, where these are the decks that you're most commonly going to face, and they are up here because they are that good. Counter picks are going to be decks that are in the meta. You will see them every now and then, but they aren't just quite as good as the true meta decks, but I still want them. I think they're good in their own tier because there's nothing really wrong with them, just maybe their matchup spread overall isn't quite as good, depending on what sort of meta you're expecting going into ranked or any kind of tournaments will boost the thought of you actually playing these. Fun, decent. These still will be decks you might run into in the meta, but they aren't specifically good at anything. They don't have really impressive matchup spreads by any means. They're just sort of here. They work. They're a good time, but don't expect to do amazing with them. And then -10, these are decks that every time I see on the ladder, I get happy because I know unless something goes catastrophically wrong, I'm about to earn 10 points. So let's just round these out because I don't want to talk about them too much. I'm gonna put Skarmory in here. Every time I play against this deck, it's just bing bang boom, so easy to play around. The damage reduction is cool, but we have like Sabrina, Cyrus. We have cards that can just hit for enough damage to still get the two-shot on Skarmory. Like, the only way that the Skarmory can prevent being two-shot is if they're able to loop Jasmine back-to-back turns, and it just doesn't happen often enough. Alolan Executor, anything like that, it's just a meme deck. Macargo as well, also a meme deck. I mean, it could go up to the fun, decent, only because of how quickly games will go. Like, you'll know if you're going to win the game as Macargo by turn 2. If your opponent is able to establish enough of a board and set up an attacker fast enough, you know you're cooked as Macargo. And then we'll also do Solgaleo. Solgaleo just isn't really around. I don't even know where to really put him because he's not played. I just figured I'd throw him up on here, but it's not really a deck to consider, in my opinion. It just, he's fallen off pretty hard with this new meta. Now we'll do our fun/decent, and the first one I'm going to put up here because I think it's the best of the fun/decent decks is Donphan EX. I'm talking Donphan EX Rampardos or Donphan EX Lucario. I, for grinding's sake, prefer the Rampardos version. Just very clean. You're going to get into a Donphan very early most of the time and then have the Rampardos in the back. It's going to help you pick up some free points. Not necessarily a super powerful deck, but a really good time. It's one of my favorite to just brainlessly queue on the ladder with. I really enjoy the deck. I'm also going to put Ho-Oh Lugia in here. Ho-Oh Lugia is okay. I really don't want to throw it up with counter picks because when you see the decks that are in the counter pick, you'll look at them and you'll go, all right, Ho-Oh Lugia, it actually does not stand a chance compared to some of these other decks. It's like, it'll do well in a tournament. It can do well on the ladder if you run hot with it, but the Lugia EX is just tough to power up. You know, you have to use the Ho-Oh in order to do so, and then your Lugia can only attack once before that's kind of it. There's just a lot that can go wrong with the deck, unfortunately. It is a good time. It's a really cool synergy between these two cards, but not much more to it. Then I'll finally put Dragonite EX into this tier as well. Again, started the meta off pretty hot. It was doing fairly decent and has since completely fallen off. I don't see it anymore at all. I don't see it in tournaments doing particularly well. It's a really powerful card, right? It can hit for 180. That's nice, but consistently showing up to these tournaments or showing up in Master Ball tier, it's not getting the job done. Moving on to the counter picks, I'm going to start with one that I don't have a lot of faith in. I'm only putting it in here because there are some players that really love the deck and can continually prove themselves with it, but I really don't have any respect for it nowadays. As a retired Greninja Oricorio main, we'll look at the top decks and just keep in mind which of those top decks have an answer to Oricorio. And with not having a necessarily all that powerful attacker in the back, you know, you can set up Giratina, and that's okay. But the Oricorio is not doing as much as it once was. Greninja is just an all-right attacker, and for your big guy being Giratina, Giratina without built-in consistency or added support just kind of doesn't feel like it does the job like it should. Now, I will also put in this deck. This deck I believe in. This deck I really like. Ho-Oh Snorlax. So Ho-Oh Snorlax is, instead of Lugia, we're using Snorlax EX because we can attack with Snorlax EX on multiple turns. Now, I have... The deck seems really split. I put the deck in a video, my last video, and the comments were either just went on a 5-loss streak with Snorlax, thanks, or just went on a 10-win streak with Snorlax, thanks. It's so wishy-washy. And one thing I see people talk about all the time when discussing the deck is, well, if you just start with Snorlax and your opponent doesn't attack you, then what are you going to do? To me, because we run in this deck, we do run our own Giratina. If your opponent decides to ignore the Snorlax in the active spot that's just kind of holding it down, you're able to then set up Giratina on the bench and another attacker. So once they finally do decide to go in on Snorlax, which they most likely will not be one-shotting at 160 HP, really tough for them to do so. For most decks to do that, we're going to have two giant attackers that are swinging for 130 apiece, set up, ready to go in the background. And from there, we can start to use our pivots or just hard retreating, manually retreating into the other one, preventing knockouts from our opponent. We can Ilima that damage Snorlax up when our opponent finally does decide to attack. I don't think the slow strategy is the way to go against this deck, because we have the opportunity to set up two really big attackers on the bench at once. Now, this deck does suffer to anything with Greninja, really, because while we're trying to set up something on the bench, like Sylveon Greninja, they can get that Greninja online pretty quickly and get the Cyrus to go with it. So if we're trying to work on something on the bench, don't want it to get attacked, they're able to just go around it. And if you start Snorlax in that matchup, that's also a problem because they don't need to attack that Snorlax, but now they're able to start pinging the bench, and they get to decide when our attackers start attacking into each other. Other than that, like, it's just hard for any deck to really trade favorably with Snorlax. So once you get that Snorlax up and going, it's really hard for any deck in the format to deal with him successfully. I like the deck. I'm not putting it in true meta or anything like that. I just think it's kind of a sleeper pick, and with the right build and the right play, can go pretty well for you. Real quick, I'll mention we haven't started the matchup charts yet because for some of these decks, there are just not enough data on them in order for me to really show a matchup chart that I'm all that pleased with. And when I haven't played the deck as much as some of the true meta things, I don't think that I have enough information to go off of. But for another counter pick deck, I'm going to throw Tapu Koko Arceus. It's just a really fast Arceus build. Because we can run the baby Pokemon and Zeraora, we can get the Arceus attacking quickly, and that's pretty scary. Same with the Tapu Koko. The Tapu Koko can just get built up, start doing 90 damage really fast. It's an okay deck. It has Oricorio in it typically to give you a nice buffer as well against some decks that aren't well equipped to deal with it. It's a cool deck. Overall, it's really not the greatest. I think there are better lightning type decks that I will show you, but it's here. It does pop up in the meta every now and then, and I usually see it in that like top 32 to top 16 range in tournaments. You know, there's always one that did fairly decent. we got to talk about a deck that I've had a major turnaround on. If you've watched me for a bit, you know I was not a fan of this deck, and I kind of am now for this meta. I'm talking about Guzzlord EX. Specifically, we'll start showing deck list and matchup spreads now. Guzzlord Naganadel. My problem with this deck for a long time was the Naganadel package is very brutal to get set up. I do still, like, personally, play-wise, like the Nihilego version more. But when I look at anything, the Nihilego version just performs worse than the Naganadel version does. So I don't think it's the most consistent thing in the world by any means, but it just does enough to get the job done. Guzzlord with its Grindcore is very funny. Sometimes with this deck too, while you're playing it, you need to consider that sometimes you have to go for a Grindcore and it has to hit a few heads or you lose. Like, it's just the way the deck is. You have to be utilizing that Grindcore. Don't like OD on it, but there are definitely times where it is I hit this Grindcore for 1 or 2 heads or I lose the game, and sometimes you just have to go for it as Guzzlord. It's a very gambly deck, but I really love having the Lusamine and all the poison and dark stuff going on. And once a Guzzlord is set up, it's just so difficult for anything in the meta to deal with. So let's hop over to the matchup chart. Charizard is very good for you because it is really difficult for a Charizard to knock out a Guzzlord. They are going to need their red in order to do so. And you can also, in the meantime, you could just keep hammering them with Grindcore. Like, you could set up one Guzzlord in the active spot and just keep Grindcoring while getting the one in the back ready to be Lusamine to, and then be your big attacker for the end of the game to get through that Charizard. Usually getting through one Charizard is going to win you the Charizard matchup, but it's very funny to just continually slow down the Charizard, keep them from attacking. Then we have, so if you take a look here, some of these matchups are really, really important. I would say Giratina and Buzzwole are probably the 2 most played decks right now. So this is why it is in the counter pick, because taking a slightly unfavored and an unfavored matchup to these 2 decks is not great, but a lot of the other meta threats, because all I'm doing on here are these are the decks that you're going to run into the most. It takes fairly decent matchups against all of them. So it is a little risky, right? Like, you're trying to dodge or just have good games against these 2 decks. They're certainly not unwinnable. In Buzzwole, it's really important to delay your Guzzlord placement until it's absolutely necessary. Because they could go Pheromosa and start building up that Guzzlord, and then your Guzzlord is just going to get Cyrused and attacked with a Buzzwole, and that's not going to be good for you. You really want to control when that Guzzlord goes into the active spot, not leaving it up to your opponent's Cyrus. So in the meantime, you want to use Naganadel or Nihilego in order to sort of tear through those Pheromosas or Kartanas, whatever your opponent's attacking with, and then save the Guzzlord to sort of 1v1 the Buzzwole at the end. Because it really is like who attacks first into the other's big EX, and they are just able to pull that off more consistently because they can go Pheromosa plus Cyrus on your Guzzlord and initiate that that trade thing that we're trying to get going. So that's why it's unfavored. And then some other good things about it, like the fact that Espeon and Sylveon is everywhere right now, and you just do fairly well against that deck, is a great thing. Like, you're taking pretty good matchups to everything but the 2 most played decks. So it's not a bad pick at all, but it is, again, just really risky to play, because when you're trying to go to a tournament or just play online, you are usually trying to take bad matchups to some of the lower tier great decks, and taking slightly bad matchups or just a bad matchup overall to the 2 best decks isn't the greatest thing in the world. So depending on what you're running into in ranked, if all you're seeing is Espeon Sylveon, which is all I'm seeing, which is why I'm playing Guzzlord, you'll do fine. But if you're running into a lot of Buzzwole or Darkrai Giratina, then stay away from the deck. And now probably the best of the counter picks are the SilvCorio decks. As I was saying earlier, Oricorio is not as good as it once was. There are certain matchups the Oricorio will just straight up win you games, and it will put your opponent in weird situations throughout, but there are quite a few decks that have decent answers to Oricorio and don't really have to sweat it too much. Silvally got a nice buff with the baby Pokemon, being able to power up that Silvally while you're going first and be able to attack with Silvally on your second turn. Going first is ridiculous. It is very, very scary to deal with. The deck is in a pretty decent spot right now. So I'm going to show you two different lists real quick. One with Pichu and one with Zeraora. And really the big difference between the two is Pichu will allow for the more consistent, I'm going first, I'm able to attack on my second turn still sort of setup, at the detriment of potentially giving up an early point to some of these Eevee decks or anything else that get hit for 30 on the first turn of the game. So here's the Pichu variant right there, to pause whatever you want to do. Here's the Zeraora variant. Zeraora variant is pretty much unchanged from last format when we were playing it, and even like the Pichu stuff isn't too much different. You now don't have to run Dawn. You can even run very similar supporter counts. The supporter counts, I don't know that there's really one agreed upon best way to run Silvally. There's just so many. I mean, do you run Cape? Do you run Double Geo? Do we run even a Silver in here? It totally depends on what you feel is the best, which is sort of how it goes with these style decks, where there's just so much space for supporters. Just whatever suits you the best and you think is better. Now let's head over to the matchup spread for the deck. So I would say, I said just on the last one that Giratina and Buzzwole are the two most played decks. Espeon Sylveon at this point is probably number 3, and on ladder could be closer to number 1, number 2. So, Silvally, Oricorio, again, we're going to be taking a good matchup to some of these big decks, right? Like Giratina, played everywhere. Charizard, a decent amount you run into. Same with these Flareon and Sylveon. And then you run into Crobats every now and then, so it's nice to take a really good matchup to it. But at the detriment of taking a bad matchup to two of the way more popular decks within the top 3, depending on tournament for the day, how the meta ended up, or what's going on your ranked grind, depending on specific time of the day, whatever you end up hitting the most of. So Silvally Oricorio has some strengths. It's going to be taking good matchups to a lot of the big decks, but at the cost of taking a bad matchup to two of the bigger decks in the format. This was another deck I was really big on last format, but have not really picked up all of that much. It can be a bit of a headache to play. You need to really focus on preserving Oricorios, placing energy down correctly, and sometimes the games can go on for a while. They've just become a war of attrition, and it's just Oricorios trying to outlast whatever baby Pokemon your opponent has in order to deal with the Oricorios. Now, for the very lowest deck in true meta, I'm going to do Crobat Sylveon. So Crobat Sylveon kind of squeaks into true meta here because I run into it so much on the ladder. Depending on the tournament, it can be the 3rd most played deck or it can be the 6th most played deck. It gets up there just depending on the day. I run into it so often, and its matchup spread isn't terrible. It also has a bit of high roll potential to it. Just getting a Crobat online instantly with Darkrai, pinging damage as well, becomes really scary for any deck that isn't able to match its draws at the moment. So let's head over. Let me show you the deck list. So this is by far, I think, the best way to play Crobat. Any stage 2 deck that is not utilizing Sylveon in some way, I think is just trolling. Every other deck in the game that is really, really good has so much built-in consistency from it either not needing to evolve at all, having an Eevee line, having Gladion to get your attackers out of the deck, or just being completely basic built, which I think I already said, but whatever. So if you're playing an evolving deck, especially a stage 2 deck, and you don't add in your own Sylveon line, you're just asking to be trolled by red card silvers, turn 1 Mars, whatever. You're going to get ruined. So I think that's also why I have it down here so low is Crobat doesn't have the sort of auto win potential of just like, oh, I got my Crobat out, GG's. There's still some work to be done once the Crobat has been created, once he's in the active spot and attacking. There's still quite a bit of work to be done in order to win that game. So I think it's just a slightly less powerful Charizard, which we will talk about in a bit. Let's head over. Let's look at the matchup chart. So again, this matchup chart is sort of similar to Guzzlord, right? Like it takes a bad matchup to the 2 top decks. And again, the only reason why I'm having it up here is because you run into Crobat a little bit more. And I think it has the high roll potential of just being a stage 2 that if you on your second turn are able to get the Crobat out and start attacking and your opponent is not drawing perfectly, it's going to be really scary for them to deal with. So some other things, like we take good matchups to pretty much all of the EV decks. They're all either even or slightly in our favor. And then we take a good matchup to Charizard. Charizard's not able to one-shot us, requires an attack in the active spot in order to get set up and attacking, and we are able to just continually chip away damage at it. We are just a much more low maintenance stage 2 than they are, and it essentially becomes a 2-shot war, which when we require way less setup in order to get going, that means we're going to come out ahead. So that's why Charizard is so favored for this deck. Not much more to say about it. Again, you're going to take a bad matchup to the 2 basically most played decks in the format right now. You can have some really annoying losses because you are a stage 2. Again, you can get hit with red card silver on your first turn before you even get to play, and you just sort of got to deal with it. It's hard to pull back as a stage 2 after getting hit with some massive hand disruption. So play at your own risk. It can be a very tilting deck to take to the ladder, but when it's working, it's a lot of fun. So here's another deck that I really honestly think barely squeaks into the true meta category, and that is Sylveon Greninja. So we'll take a look at the matchup spread for this deck. It's nothing like really that impressive. I think the only thing that gets it here and why players keep coming back to it is it's a very skill heavy deck, and the better players are rewarded for it. And it might just be that with the data, the slightly subpar players are the ones that are kind of taking it down. And the people who are very good at the deck might look at the matchup chart and go, no, that's not entirely true. I feel like I have a slightly better matchup, or probably just a slightly better matchup to some of the ones you'll see here in the, the lower tier of matchup. So let's take a look at what we're doing with Sylveon Greninja. Not much has changed with the deck besides we have now slotted a silver in for the red card plus silver play. You can go back and forth on whether you're running collect EV or find a friend EV. I think both are fine. I don't know. So finding evolution pieces I think is better to me. Just being able to guarantee, hopefully, get either a Greninja for our rare candy into Froakie, or just get a Sylveon to unlock the draw, rather than just taking a blank card and potentially getting like a Cyrus when we don't want it, or the Giant Cape, or the Silver too early. I think I like to find a friend more, because usually at the beginning of the game, what you're looking for is Pokemon, and that's about the only time you're going to be using the EV to attack is at the beginning of the game. So taking a look at the matchup spread, unfavored down here. Darktina and Espeon Sylveon are not great for you. Charizard is not great for you. And then the rest are pretty even. Now, once again, it could just be that some of the lower caliber players are the ones bringing some of these matchup data statistics down. Maybe Giratina, Darkrai, or Espeon Sylveon is better if you are a bit more of a skilled pilot. I can honestly see Espeon Sylveon not being as bad, even though it's coming in so low, just because you will have the Giratina plus Greninja to start. Like, once Giratina's up and Greninja's up, unless your opponent is... What am I trying to say? Unless they have a Giant Cape on something, then the Giratina plus Greninja combo is going to be able to get through any of their big EX attackers. So I can see it going both ways. I don't know that I'd quite consider it unfavored, but that's just what the data is showing. And then the rest, it's just all even, right? And then you take like a favored matchup to Flareon Leafeon, but the rest it's pretty much all just 50-50s, and you're gonna win by outplaying your opponent, right? Because this deck, it's not like these Sylveon decks are so dang consistent, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. They get Sylveon, and don't even get me started on Espeon Sylveon. We'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, these decks that get to run double Sylveon end up being really, really consistent, especially when the stage 2 is not the primary focus of what we're trying to get from that Sylveon, right? We're just trying to get Sylveon from Sylveon. Well, we're trying to find Sylveon, so then we can start attacking with Sylveon. And the stage 2, when it comes, is nice, but it's not like an immediate, hey, we need to get this stage 2 out in order to start playing the game. So, yeah, the consistency of this deck is just ridiculous. It feels so good to play. I love having my opponent take the full 90-second turn because they drew their entire deck on the second turn of the game. Just ridiculous. But overall, I don't enjoy playing it all that much. This matchup spread kind of scares me with everything being so close and taking already bad matchups to some of the most played decks in the format, but that is just my opinion. Next up, we have Charizard EX, and this deck is essentially unchanged from last format. We'll go over here. We'll take a look at the deck list. The only thing is that now, like last format, I don't believe every single version of it was running red. I think it's an absolute necessity now to deal with Crobat, to get over Espeons or Sylveons with giant capes. I think the red is an absolute necessity in this deck at this point. The only other thing I think is maybe a Guzma in here. The Flareon, I've always been a non-believer in the Flareon. I think with this deck, you just lose to SilvCorio, and you kind of got to deal with it. The Flareon, it's like, it's possible for it to overcome the SilvCorio decks, but for the most part, the matchup is so abysmal that it doesn't really matter. This could be a Guzma or something to give you some slightly better win percentage points against the other decks. So let's take a look at this matchup spread. We are not doing great into Crobat because they don't just have 170, which is, I need to hit red for it. They also can throw a giant cape on there. And like I said when I was talking about Crobat, is they just trade into us a lot more effectively than we trade into them. SilvCorio, it's SilvCorio. We don't really have any answers besides that Flareon, and that thing is impossible to set up in this deck. I mean, you got to attach to it 3 times and find it. I don't understand it. I don't get the Flareon in there. Espeon Sylveon, so another thing, like Espeon Sylveon attacks so quickly, has such good hand disruption, draws their entire deck like every time because you just have 4 EVs in the deck, so you are able to use the Sylveons on the bench to draw your cards for basically no penalty, and then set your opponent down to low. It's just tough. Like, they're gonna do exactly what they want to every game, and if they're able to slow you down even a little bit with that red card or that silver, you're gonna be in a pretty bad spot. But the rest of the meta is pretty good for you. Darktina, Sylveon Greninja, Flareon, and Buzzwole, all pretty decent matchups. Darktina Darkrai it's at 50-50. From my experience, you kind of need to set up the Charizard as soon as you are able to evolve, or else things start to get bad for you. If you're not able to do that, things get really tricky really quick. They will be able to loop Giratina plus Darkrai attacks into the Charizard and win the game that way. But Flareon, Leafeon, and Buzzwole, Leafeon with a cape can't survive because of weakness. Flareon is most likely going to damage itself a little bit unless they combo with the EV bag, and then you don't even need the cape. But if they have the cape, they can, or you can go red and knock out the Flareon. The deck just doesn't trade well into you. And Buzzwole, again, Buzzwole trades terribly into you. You one-shot everything in front of you. They're not really that quick to set up a Buzzwole. You have the Lily to stop your opponent from attacking with, like, Kartana, getting some damage on you, and then going into Buzzwole, you'll just be able to Lily and put yourself out of Buzzwole damage range. So it's a really, really abysmal matchup for Buzzwole. Always has been. Deck seems pretty okay right now. Again, though, it's a stage 2. You're going to get hit with red card, silver plays a lot, and being the deck that you are, it's going to punish you a lot harder than if you were a Sylveon deck or something like that. Or, sorry, an EV-based deck that has more access to EVs and gets their EV set up more consistently. and then needing to find that stage 2 off of that one Sylveon after being hit with a red card plus silver, or just a red card in general. It's a lot harder for you to come back from those hand disruptions than any of these other decks. So will be annoying, but if it does set up, like if you get that Charizard set up, it's really hard for your opponent to do much about it. They kind of have that one early turn to set you back, and if they do not set you back and you're able to get Charizard up, it's almost just GG's from there. Again, very, very tough for any of these decks to deal with. It doesn't have an SilvCorio in it, or a better, more efficient stage 2 attacking into you. Next up in the true meta, I'm going to put Buzzwole. So Buzzwole we've talked a lot about today. I think that there are better meta decks than it. Looking at the matchup spread, I will go over here. I'll show you two different styles of Buzzwole that I've been seeing. This is a more aggro build. One Pheromosa, one Kartana. These ones seem to be performing better than the Buzzwole Pheromosa builds. It's weird. The Buzzwole Pheromosa build has a higher win percentage on average than this deck does. And the matchup spreads are like completely different. There are so I had to find a middle ground for some of the decks. But this deck, so we run no hand disruption in this deck, and we have a red and a Rocky Helmet. I do like the red. I don't love that we don't have any form of hand disruption. But for some of the matchups, sometimes it just doesn't even matter. Like if you're playing against Espeon Sylveon, I'm gonna be honest, it's really, really hard for hand disruption to do anything against that deck. Like they have, if they don't use a research turn 1, and you use a red card on them, they now have Sylveons as outs. They now have research. Like, they literally just have double the outs to get out of that situation. And it just feels like the red card sometimes just does not slow them down. Like, you'll just be looking at their hand on turn 1, and they'll have 3 cards, and it's like, well, what do I do? And then they go, Sylveon, research, second Sylveon. And then they play their hand down all the way still, and it's like, well, the red card doesn't seem great anymore. And by then, they've gone through their entire deck, and there's never really a chance for the red card to do much of anything. So in some matchups, the hand disruption doesn't matter, and the damage is way nicer. Like the red plus Rocky Helmet against Espeon, Sylveon feels a lot better than any form of hand disruption. But in other matchups, the hand disruption is a bit better, like this, where we have red card plus silver. Still find the room for the red, but no Rocky Helmet in here. And this deck chooses to play 2 Pheromosa, 1 Kartana. So it'd still technically be Buzzwole Pheromosa. It becomes Buzzwole Celesteela if there's a 1-1 split between the two. There's no preference or no priority given to one of the 2 baby attackers. So let's head over to the matchup spread. We're bad into fire stuff, really bad. Nothing has changed there. Charizard is like, Charizard and Flareon Leafeon, you know, these are still really popular decks, so it sucks to take 2 really tough matchups to them, but it is what happens. And that's another thing, is that the red card plus silver can give you a slight edge against Charizard. Like if you're able to fully shut down Charizard with red card silver, then you're going to win the game. That's about your only hope in that matchup, is if you're playing a hand disruption build, that you actually get to stick them with the disruption. Flareon Leafeon, it's really hard for them to dead draw. They have all the built-in consistency with the Eevee and the Sylveons, so it's tough to slow that deck down. But the other matchups, like, these are all good. These are all good. Guzzlord's good for you. Sylveon's good for you. Anything that's even or better is just a good matchup to have. So against some of these other really popular decks, you know, you're going to do fine against, but it is at the detriment of these 3. Still possible, just becomes a little bit more difficult, and you can tech your deck out for Espeon, Sylveon, or for Charizard, whichever you're a little bit more afraid of, which is why I think the aggro version did so well, because there is just more Espeon, Sylveon on average than Charizard, and the red card plus Rocky Helmet gives you that slight edge in this matchup. Doesn't completely flip it, but it does help quite a bit. Next, we have Flareon Leafeon. There's not a whole lot to say about Flareon Leafeon, because even in the list, it is completely unchanged from where we were last in the meta. We didn't add any new cards except for the Find a Friend Eevee. Instead of collect, we're using Find a Friend. So there's really not much to say here. I'll go over and I'll show you the matchup spread. We're good against Buzzwole. We are good into Crobat Sylveon. And we really only take a bad matchup to Sylveon Greninja and Charizard, and then SilvCorio Silvally, slightly concerning, but we can get it done with the baby Leafeon. Other than that, we're taking 50-50s to some of the more popular decks in the format, or again, like that. So against the two most popular decks, you're taking this is barely not slightly favored. It's really close to it. And Buzzwole is just a complete blowout because of Flareon does so well into Buzzwole EX. So, yeah, great matchup spread for this deck. Super, super consistent. It is really hard for this deck to stutter because we have all of the EVs and the Sylveons in the deck. Just a fantastic deck overall. It's going to do what it wants to do most games. And even, again, same thing with Charizard. If you're able to keep them from doing what they want to, evolving into that Charizard right away, and you get the aggro Leafeon out and are just able to start taking out Charmanders, you could still pull ahead in that matchup. Even though once the Charizard is set up, it does become a bit unwinnable for you. But if you're able to delay that and just use your fast aggression against the Charizard, then you're going to come out ahead. So for our final true meta, I have Espeon Sylveon, the newcomer. No one expected the Espeon to be this great. But it is. It's got a lot of healing in the deck, and it is just so consistent. It is the only deck running double Sylveon that has access to 4 EVs. So this deck can just explode. It can absolutely explode. I have many games played with Espeon Sylveon or played against Espeon Sylveon where my opponent or myself on our second turn are down to a 5-card deck because we just hit 3 EV on turn 1 and are then able to use both Sylveon to just get everything we need and play our hand down. And then it just becomes like any hand disruption your opponent has becomes effectively null and void. Like there's no reason for them to until you've taken 2 points and then they Mars, but you're able to just play your deck down and get your hand size so low and your deck size so low that even a Mars isn't going to be the worst thing in the world for you. So it's a really it's just probably the most consistent deck in the game that isn't our number 1, which I'll just throw up here right now, but we'll go back and talk about it. It's just a ridiculous deck. So here's the list. We are now on 1 Sylveon, 1 Espeon. I really love the Espeon being a 1 energy attacker here, because there are times when you go first that your opponent doesn't really allow you to set up, an Espeon attacking the active spot with 1 energy on a Sylveon or another Espeon ready to go for the next turn. Sometimes you need to weave in the 1 energy attacker, and Espeon is a really decent attacker. I mean, upwards, you're probably capping out at about 100 damage. Not a lot of decks will have your opponent putting more than 5 energy into play, so usually that's about where you cap out. But we have this Sylveon to hit a little bit harder, 40 plus 30 for each of our benched evolution Pokemon. So Sylveon can get all the way up to 130. Just be that little bit of extra damage we need to get over. But like I said, we're so consistent, and we get to abuse silver plus red card because we just have the deck space for it. This deck is really just about out-consistencying your opponent, because again, it doesn't really have anything overly powerful about it. Like, we're just hitting for, most of the time, most of our attacks are just doing 80 damage, and then we're healing ourselves a little bit. But because we can do that consistently every single game, add in some disruption and some other attackers to weave in throughout the game, it's just really scary. So let's head over to the matchup spread. Everything is like so even. It's not good into any of the dark stuff. They just are able to deal with the Espeons a little bit too easy because of our weakness. They both hit for good damage numbers that are going to allow them to start one-shotting our Pokemon, while we can't do the same, and we aren't really good at disrupting them because they are just basic base decks. Like, Giratina is just a Darkrai ping and a red away from knocking out an Espeon. Just a Darkrai ping away if you do not have a giant cape on. Guzzlord, same story. They can even throw like a poison barb on, so once you do attack into them, you're just going to die to poison. Crobat, same thing. Crobat, you're going to get into a 2-shot war, but they're going to come out ahead because they have more HP. You're not going to be able to reach for that 170 without that 1 EV bag in the list. And they are hitting for weakness plus poison, so they're just going to be able to get through the Espeons so easily. Flareon Leafeon, again, same story. They will have a way to one-shot. This deck really just does well against decks that cannot one-shot or have something that you can slow them down with, because you are going to out-consistency them. So that's really the story of Espeon. It will do good against the decks that cannot one-shot, because it is the most consistent two-shotting deck in the game. And things that do one-shot and cannot really easily be disrupted are going to come out ahead on Espeon. And like I mentioned, last deck to talk about is Giratina Darkrai. This matchup spread is ridiculous. You are doing so well against any of the EV things that are not Flareon Leafeon. Flareon Leafeon can give you some trouble if you start Darkrai and they're able to just Leafeon attack twice and get through the Darkrai and take that quick early 2 points. Their Flareon is also able to reach for a one-shot on the Giratina, and then the Darkrai cannot really respond, and they just power up the Flareon right back and are probably able to reach again for a knockout on the Darkrai. Very, very tricky, but it's still not unwinnable. SilvCorio, it's just SilvCorio that kind of blocks this deck. There are still ways. If you have Darkrai pings plus Rocky helmets on whatever's in the active spot, the SilvCorio is not having a good time trading into it, and these decks do not run a lot of heals. Charizard is slightly unfavored, because if Charizard is able to get set up really quickly, then you're in trouble, but you have so much disruption that you can just scam them out of the game, and that's that. But every other deck here is like either ridiculously favored or even, you know, like again, even these decks, the matchups are not terrible for you at all, and you are so consistent. You are usually doing your thing every single game while disrupting your opponent. I mean, it is just the most powerful deck in the game still. There's still not a really great answer to Giratina Darkrai. It's just the best deck on paper. It just won the Ursaday Pocket Weekly last week. I expect it to continue to do well. It's one of those decks where it can adapt to the meta pretty easily by changing up the supporter cards it plays, and other decks can't really adapt to it all that well. There's no specific card inclusion that's going to give you a really big edge against Giratina Darkrai. So it is what it is. Giratina Darkrai is here to stay and is still the best deck. So this is the tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys appreciated the matchup charts and the deck list I threw in here. No deck list for Darkrai Giratina. I'm not going to push that on you. I feel like that's equivalent to me selling you guys vapes or something. Like it's just Merchant of Death stuff, you know. I don't need to do that. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Good luck if you're entering the tournament this weekend. Good luck on your rank grind, and I will see you on the next one.